The International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, or ICERD, is a United Nations convention that Malaysia is due to ratify in the first quarter of 2019. We've already signed 3 similar conventions to protect the rights of children, women, and the disabled. Well done us! Pat on the back! Oh, wait. The ICERD is basically a declaration that your country is committed to eliminating racial discrimination and promoting understanding among all races, which is clearly an admirable thing to aspire to. Almost all countries have already agreed to follow this set of principles. Malaysia is one of only 14 countries that have yet to act on the convention, which means we're keeping company with nations like Myanmar, South Sudan, and North Korea.
Signing the ICERD is going to be a positive step. In fact, not just ICERD, I think as far as all the other human rights treaties are concerned, I think Malaysia should join the ranks of all other countries that are concerned about human rights and equality and non-discrimination.
But there are some very vocal groups who are very unhappy with the idea of ICERD. Along with the 1,000-person street protest, at the time of filming, over 118,000 Malaysians have signed a Change.org petition calling on the government not to ratify the ICERD. The petition's creator, Luqman Sharif, states that to ratify it would contradict the Constitution and necessarily see Bumiputra and Malay special privileges revoked. Not helping matters, there have been rumors that ratifying the ICERD would result in Article 153 of the Federal Constitution, which lays out the Bumiputra and Malay special privileges being abolished. Anti-ICERD sentiment is so strong, constitutional lawyer Tan Sri Abdul Aziz Abdul Rahman called people who support the ratification orang gila, or insane. Even some members of the Pakatan Harapan administration have called for ICERD to be rejected if it is found to undermine the monarchy, the position of Islam, and other constitutional provisions. And our PM has said that to implement ICERD would be almost impossible given that it would mean changing the federal constitution, and that would require a 2/3 majority to pass in parliament, which is highly unlikely to happen. But hold up, can we do a quick fact check here? The government had previously given its assurance that Article 153 of the Constitution will not be abolished if the ICERD ratification goes through. That's because the convention does not see our special provisions as racial discrimination. In fact, it's affirmative action and gets the big ICERD thumbs up.
At the heart of ICERD, essentially, provisions relating to equality and non-discrimination. Yeah? And you have those very same principles contained in the Federal Constitution. If you look at Article 1 sub 4 of ICERD, for example, this is just the existence of special measures where the purpose is for adequate advancements of certain ethnic groups or individuals. So, in other words, it's somewhat similar to Article 153 in that sense. So, we have equality, which is the objective of the Constitution, but at the same time, there are sub-provisions which deals with the reality that there are communities that need assistance because of where they are at this point in time. So once essentially, members of those communities are at par with the other segments of society, you should remove that assistance. So it's the same with ICERD, and frankly it's the same even with the Federal Constitution. So I don't see why the Constitution needs to be amended just because ICERD has got some provisions on equality.
Countries like the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa also have affirmative action policies in place that help to empower women, people with disabilities, and yes, people of certain ethnicities. These countries have also signed or ratified the ICERD, so it's safe to say that Malaysian affirmative action should be able to remain. And if you were wondering about Islam's status as our official religion, well, the ICERD doesn't contravene our constitution on that point either. It does say everybody has the right to freedom of religion, but then so does Article 11 of our constitution. One more point of contention is the monarchy. Some opposers say the ICERD would strip our monarchy of its power, but the ICERD doesn't actually say anything about the ruling system. And even if it did, anything that is protected under the federal constitution, our monarchy for example, is pretty much untouchable. This is because for an international treaty's policies to be enforced here, new domestic legislation will need to be passed. And any piece of Malaysian legislation needs to fall in line with the constitution because it's the highest law in the land. Anyway, of the 38 countries that practice constitutional monarchy, 36 are part of the ICERD, including the United Kingdom, Cambodia, and Thailand, and they're doing fine.
To put it very simply, as far as ICERD is concerned, it must be consistent with the constitution. So it's not a cause for concern at all.
What about Malay special rights?
There's no such thing. The term is special position, and affirmative action is allowed to maintain that special position, because basically the fear was that economically you're so far behind that you'll be perpetually in that state of backwardness, right? That's all it is.
What our federal constitution allows for in Article 153 is for the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to, on advisement from the government, dictate certain quotas that should be allocated to Malays and the natives of Sabah and Sarawak. This was made in the spirit of helping these communities to equalize with the others. But there is nothing in the Constitution that allows this to go on forever. In fact, the actual wording says, where reasonable. And it stands to reason that once all communities have reached parity, that there's not really a need for special help.
It's not in contradiction to our Constitution, because historically we wanted this country to be equal. Our founding fathers wanted this country to be equal. And also, if you look at the Constitution, Article 153 says that these provisions are to be done if it's reasonable. If everything's okay, if everyone is more or less on par, then it's not reasonable to continue treating people unequally. Unless you like people being treated unequally, then tell me that you are racist and you like unequal treatment. Then I would at least applaud you for your honesty.
There's no getting around or sugarcoating it. Our policies are race-based, and they're likely to remain that way until we've achieved economic equilibrium across all communities. And we can work with that, because our country was pretty much segregated by race during colonial times. 61 years on, we're still cleaning up that mess. So things like the Malaysian Indian Blueprint and the Article 153 are still needed in order to work towards that long-awaited equality. In the meantime, let's give human rights a go. But with so much opposition, the big question is, how is Pakatan Harapan going to uphold its pledge on human rights if it can't ratify the ICERD? Well, one way for it to work out is for Malaysia to ratify the convention with reservations.
Some treaties allow for reservations. A reservation, to use a Malaysian colloquialism, is you say chop, chop. I agree with everything, but chop, chop. I don't want to follow, say, Article 5. Right? So a reservation is that where you pull yourself out of a particular provision. They can also do other things. They can do what is known as clarification, where they can say, yes, we accept the treaty as a whole, however, we interpret Article 7 to mean this.
UN human rights conventions are technically legally binding, but there's almost no way to enforce it. There is an International Court of Justice, but there isn't anything like an international police force to arrest countries. So enforcement is kind of hard. The question now is, once the government ratifies everything, how do they stay accountable? What happens if we just don't carry out any of the human rights reforms stated in the conventions?
Shame. Because you have committees, etc., you have reports. There can be a degree of national embarrassment. But, it depends on how thick the skin of our national leaders are. If you have a particularly thick, leathery type skin, then you wouldn't care.
But why wait for the international community to frown and shake a finger at us if we fall short, right? After all, we have the power to hold our government accountable.
Personally, I think, it's not about the international community. It's about the national community. It's about us. When they sign and ratify these things, they're putting themselves to a higher standard. So we cannot depend on Theresa May. She's too busy dancing and doing the robot or whatever it is, right? So we've got to depend on ourselves to sort our own problems. And it's a good thing. When they sign these treaties, that means you've agreed to these principles.
And there you have it. It's down to us to ensure our country is the best it can be. And it starts with fully understanding the conventions our government is poised to ratify and holding it to its promises. We say fully understand because that's the first step to making informed decisions. Maybe that's what we should be doing instead of following the loudest voices. And we're looking at you too, government. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Did you manage to catch our previous episode on Budget 2019? Speaking of that, shout out to our top comment of the week from Jake Vittore on YouTube. He said, "I'm statistically awesome. I have to agree there isn't anything yet to be discussed on sustainability and climate change. We need to start from the ground up, from educating in schools and all the way to household, then to corporation. I know it's far-fetched dream to reach Sweden or Japan's level, but we need to start separating our trash again ASAP." And he had a bunch of other suggestions. Thanks for commenting, Jake. In the meantime, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it and tell us what you think.